You're not here to be weenie. You're here to be immense.
Louise Lebrun, the founder of the WEL-Systems body of knowledge, is one of the women that I can have a conversation with, step in, and she takes the conversation and blows it up into the highest possible context that it can be in. Moments when I'm lost to my own uncertainty and moments where I don't see clearly, I don't see the forest for the trees. Louise Lebrun comes in and shifts that perspective simply by being herself and telling the truth of her experience. In this exploration, I invited Louise to come and have a chat with me about what is decloaking and what does that mean to her and how did it come to be what it is. And immediately, as you will notice in the conversation, Louise shifts it from the particulars of the experience and into the intentionality of the experience. And the intentionality of the experience rests at a much larger context than the experience itself. It rests on the context of, I am not my body. I am the signal that animates the body. And decloaking is the first, let's call it step, where you get to have a visceral experience of what that means, what's been getting in the way for you to have noticed until now, and what you can actually do in the moment that you're in when your body is talking to you, when your body is speaking and it speaks in its own language. When you know how to listen to the language of the body and it is speaking to you, to know what to actually do in those moments is essential. And when you know what to do in those moments, because you trust the body, you trust the signal, and you trust the messaging that's seeking to be downloaded into your reality, the whole point of that is so that you can make intentional choices. So why does this matter? Why does an intentional choice matter? Well, if you're not living intentionally, you're living habitually. And habituated living has gotten us to where we've gotten so far. Intentional living has the potential to take us out of this madness that we're living through. At every step, the seeking to remove intentionality, right? Especially now with the world of artificial intelligence, when you cannot express an original thought without filtering it through AI to see if that's a good enough thought. You cannot write an email without AI. You cannot submit a school paper or work without AI. And those are all attempts to take ownership of our minds and habituate us into passivity, into being passive. If you want to live your life from an intentional, activated, internal state, because you know it's meaningful for you and there's consequences to choosing to live this way, then I invite you to listen in to this conversation between Louise Lebrun and myself. We explore all kinds of magnificent things that, from my experience now in the world of searching, I don't find anywhere else. Her capacity to bring it all together and to make it aligned with the intentionality of the body of knowledge that she birthed is spectacular, is uncanny, is life-altering simply in one conversation. For myself, during the conversation, I was provoked. I was challenged by my own seeking to make this process of decloaking understandable and palatable when it's not always so. It is an experiential process for those that are seeking to live as the essence of their being, for those that are seeking to live authentically. And it is not a love and light process. Living authentically is not a love and light process. It demands that we show up. It demands that we become intentional. It demands that we know how to hear the voice of conditioning from the voice of truth, and being able to decipher and differentiate those voices is essential. So in this conversation, we go through what it means to live this way. What is it that makes a difference? What does it mean to own your own mind? And how is this so challenging for us, particularly now, particularly for those of us raising young children, particularly for those of us who are living in the deep depths of historical shame and fear that sustains the illusions in place? What does it mean to let go of those illusions and to choose the legitimate voice that comes through your body, to choose your authentic, legitimate voice over the culturally conditioned one? So, discovering what I am as the signal that animates the body, what does it mean in my practical life when I stay with the process of knowing that my body speaks the language of my, let's call it soul, like the language of my signal, the language of the quantum that I am expressing through biology? What does it mean to actually live this way? And how does the science back this all up? So these are all things that we explore in this conversation with Louise. And certainly we go deeper into the 5-day intensive together, where you bring what's meaningful for you to explore in the moment that you're in, along with other 5 women, over 5 full days. And we explore what's meaningful to you in the moment that you're in. So you might have a moment where you have an experience and it could scare you, or it could enrage you or outrage you, whatever it happens to be. We stay with that experience in the safety of the crucible of the experience, and then show you, teach you, educate you into how to stay in that for discovery and not lose yourself in the habituated way. And once you know how to do that, we go through your experience, through the models and the perceptual filters that the WEL-Systems body of knowledge provides you with. And it is a complete picture. You will leave not only knowing what you are as a quantum biological being, but you will also understand what your body does, and you will trust your body to do what it's designed to do. And so when you go out there and you make your choices, you become more mindful about the kinds of choices that you're making. And mindful choices lead to a mindful life, and a mindful life feels like it belongs to you. So without further ado, I will pass it on to Louise Lebrun, and I encourage you to just relax into the listening experience. Let your body guide you. Listen with your mind, of course, but let your body guide you. And as you're listening, if at any point you feel a constriction and uncertainty, I invite you to notice where you're holding your breath. And when you notice that you're holding your breath and where you're holding your breath, it gives you information. But once you notice that you're holding your breath, I invite you to intentionally exhale and then intentionally inhale. And I want you to do that 3 times mindfully as you continue to listen. So simply allow yourself to listen, attention in your body. And, you can move around, right? Like you can wash your dishes, or you can go for a walk, or you can do something expressive with your body. You can paint, but give yourself permission to let your body listen for the deeper inner truths that you will necessarily hear in this conversation. So without further ado, I'll pass the mic on to Louise Lebrun. Enjoy the conversation.
For me, it's bigger than decloaking. It's about the body of knowledge. And I think that's one of the places where many people miss the opportunity of a much greater impact because they don't see the bigger picture.
Mm.
And the bigger picture is, and this is supported in today's science, peer-reviewed science, you and I are, we're not the body, we're the signal. And then the question becomes, what is the signal?
Mhm.
Because when you begin to understand that you're not your body, and the body as a container for history, you're actually pure potential. That shift in mindset allows you to turn your life around in a breath.
Mm.
Decloaking is the first step to
Mhm.
helping you become adept at being able to live your life like that.
Mhm.
So for me, decloaking, all meaning is context dependent. Decloaking sits in the much larger context of you are a living God force.
Mhm.
And decloaking, engaging, manifesting are the processes that give you what you need, the experience of the discovery plus a proven process to be able to profoundly change how you live. So for me, as the creator of the body of knowledge, there's a path to this that rationalizes and explains and supports that larger context of signal. And then there's a current structure of where are we in the ability to live life differently? Because the recent experience that you and I had with an email from a colleague is that, to me, the bottom line is if you are not actively, intentionally, mindfully choosing to be in this conversation every single day of your life, by default, you're in the other one. Because the other one is culturally and globally pervasive.
Mhm.
So if you do not mindfully and intentionally choose to interrupt that default, you're swept up in the current of it. And then before you know it, 3 months has gone by and you can't understand why your life is falling apart. So there's an intentional mindfulness that is required in the now with regard to being able to be effective in living this way, in actually creating a meaningful, resilient, resourceful life for yourself, whoever you happen to be. And what does it take to sustain that? Because where I see over the years that I have lived my life like this, the only thing that makes me different from anybody else is that every single day I wake up and the first question I ask myself is, how does the living God force that I am choose to live my life today? And everything flows from that. And that simple morning reminder lifts me out of the default and ensures that I am not a victim to my own mindlessness. Because in a reality where all is mind, if I am not in full ownership of my mind, guaranteed somebody else is.
Mm.
And then my life begins to reflect their mindfulness, not mine. And then I can't understand what happened in my life, right?
Mhm.
And for me, the future of it, and you and I have had this conversation many times, that I am the past. I represent the past. I was, I devoted and committed my life to figuring this out because of an instance in my reality that gobsmacked, transformed my reality in minutes. And then I spent the next 40 years of my life trying to figure out what was that, what happened, and how to embrace that so that it could continue to make a difference in my life and it could be generalized in such a way that other people, if they chose, could access this for themselves and enhance the quality of their lives.
Mm.
But I am not the future of this body of knowledge. I'm, 70, I'll be 76 in August. You're the future. And because I work with women, the women in your slice of culture are the future. It's going to take, and what is it going to take? It's going to take courage. It's going to take curiosity. It's going to take a willingness to live an insightful life. It's going to take resilience in the face of mockery and disapproval and ridicule and all the things that it's taken for the last 30 years. It's going to take it for the next 30 years. But then it becomes, how is that going to look different in your era? Because yours is the era of technology.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was developing this body of knowledge and field testing and, doing all the research that was required to be able to compress it all and contextualize it and generalize it so that it could be, like the decloaking audio material is a profoundly transformational experience on whatever it is, 20, 25 CDs, 20, I think it is, 20 hours. But what's the future going to take? I think it's going to take more from you and from your peers than it took from me, because my mind, in my evolutionary time, it was so much easier for my generation and subsequent generation to notice that my mind is critical to the quality of my life. Today, you have to fight for ownership of your own mind. And I think that's terrifying. And I think about you and other women in your age group. I think about my sons. And I think about the absolute concerted, coalesced, highly, highly organized and intentional effort to take full ownership of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because when that happens, and it's happening already all over the world, nobody's noticing. When that happens, you are now a bit player in the theater of the quality of your own life. So I think what it's going to take in the future is something that is going to, my evolutionary path through this and my peer group, we definitely were swimming upstream. There's no two ways about that. However, your peer group is the swim upstream is in the face of a current that is so much more pervasive and organized, with the intent behind it to strip you of ownership of your own mind.
Mm.
So to me, I did not experience myself in my evolutionary path with this as being on a battlefield. I never felt that way. I always felt it was really about being willing to be curious and being willing to say out loud the discoveries that my curiosity had led to. My belief about it is that you and your peers, you are on a battlefield. So you live in a reality where deception, betrayal, hypocrisy, the flavor of the month truth that can so easily be re-scripted and then projected out into the world like that, effortless. That is the technological age that we live in. That is the AI world that we live in, and AI and everything attached to it is being presented to us as if it is a very, very sexy thing to have in your life.
Mm-hmm.
It is the degree to which it plays a part in your life is a measure of your sophistication and your adaptability and your willingness to be on the cutting edge and all of those things as they keep taking more and more and more of the ownership of your mind. I think that's what you are facing into. I didn't have to do that.
Well, and I noticed the seduction for myself, right, over the last year where I unintentionally lost bits of my voice, right? Where like I would filter through, because AI is a filter, and I would filter my original thought through this filter and then begin to notice that it cloaks the truth, right? Like it cloaks what I was seeking to say, and it takes what I'm saying and compresses it to words that don't belong to me, but worse than that, a mindset that doesn't belong to me, and then rewards me for having done it right. Now you've got it. So that perceptual filter that now is everywhere. It's in email, it's in my texts, it's like actually everywhere. And it's very difficult to turn it off, even if I knew how to turn it off.
Yes.
Right. So there's nowhere that's now available. And this is now 2026, right? Like what's going to happen 10 years down the line. But there's nowhere that's available for the truth of my experience to be expressed in the original form, whether that's polite or not, or whether that's, quote unquote, good or not, or whatever it happens to be, whether it's aligned with the intentionality of artificial intelligence or not, because it's a culture. It's a filter of and from the culture that reinforces that I don't know what I'm talking about. So to
Well,
me,
I don't think you're looking at what's going to happen in 10 years. I think you're looking at 2 to 3.
yes.
I don't think it's that far off. Um, the other thing too is that, and I think this is going to be one of the greatest challenges for the future, is the realization that it's not inevitable. It is a choice.
Mm,
And the choice is, by necessity, one that will require that your life become the antithesis of everything you just talked about.
mm,
Part of what's happening today, for example, that I think is a metaphor for what I consider to be indicative of a path that we are already on that I think is going to be self-destructive. In university, when people are writing papers now and they're writing a thesis or whatever, AI is writing the thesis and then that person is submitting it as their voice.
mm,
It's not their voice.
mhm,
But how subtle is the undermining nature of that?
mhm.
Then I am willing to attribute to something outside of me, yes, have it represent me as here, this is my voice. No, it's not your voice. And yet the seduction of that is that if I say that is my voice long enough, I no longer know what my voice is.
Yes.
And I no longer can present my voice at the level of refinement, potentially linguistically, that AI can produce.
Mm,
And so, by virtue of my genetic historical shame, I begin to propagate the lie myself,
mm.
right?
So this is a very fun exploration because one of the things that I've noticed, and I love exploring with women in whatever coaching capacity, is this notion of voice. So often, particularly before decloaking, women will hear competing messages in their head and they'll hear competing voices in their head, and they won't know which one is their voice and which one isn't. And so many times, they've taken ownership of a voice that is diminishing and destructive and inducing shame and fear. And they say, that's my voice. And I find that so interesting, our willingness to take ownership of a destructive voice and not unpack it to discover which one's actually my voice. And I think that's going to get more intense as as we go on into this world. It's going to get more insidious and I think destructive. So to me, that speaks to the power of the process that you birthed and refined and continue to share with the world up until I found it, which and and the world generalized as a process for living is what catches my personal attention because I have a scientific mind, right? Like I have a mind that says, well, there is a process and the habituated process looks like this. These are the things, ABC. And then the process that we're introducing you to looks like this. And this is what's possible through this process. So like if the habit will lead you to path A, this way of living will lead you to a path that is yet undefined and yet will be defined as you engage and navigate it from the truth of who you are. So I wrote down the generalized is what's the genius of this for me. Like that's the differentiating factor between what we do at WEL-Systems and what everybody out there does.
Well, and here's why. So yes to everything you said, and here's why I think the past is important here. Because in my experience with it, my voice, that which is authentically and intuitively and innately my unique expression of being in the world, does not have words attached to it. Is not a narrative that I run in my head. It's not a competing story of my past with my future. My voice lives in my body.
Mm.
And my body is speaking all the time. The question is, can I understand it? The question is, am I willing to even pay attention to it? Because the cultural conditioning is such that the authentic expression of my being, i.e., what was going on in my body, for all of us from birth is deeply, deeply discouraged. Because we don't want that voice to become dominant. We want the cultural voice. We want the parental voice. We want the accepted narrative. We want the guided, constructed, molded story to be the one that takes the lead, which is why there are so many competing quote unquote voices in our head. Our mother's voice, the priest's voice, a boss's voice, the lawyer's voice, whatever it happens to be. In my reality, for decades now, none of it is legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
The only legitimate voice that is authentically mine is the tightening in my gut.
Mm.
It's the pressure in my chest. It's the migraine that bursts into my reality in the middle of a conversation that lives somewhere above my eyebrows and between my ears. That is my voice. Am I willing to notice, or do I dismiss that as I'm broken, I'm sick, there's something wrong with me, this is an interference, this is getting in the way? Or do I actually learn why that is my voice? That's the whole relationship in the pure science today that is supported, in that my body is this amazing, amazing device, but it is not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Who I am is the information that streams through my body. And processing speed, as in any good instrument, is essential to understand here. And the processing speed of my body far exceeds the processing speed of my ability to attach linguistic cues to things. Because the minute that I attach a linguistic cue to something and say, this is X, by virtue of having done that, it can no longer be anything else other than X. So everything else that lives as a possibility disappears because I have now compressed and condensed the moment down to X.
Mm.
Whereas being able to understand, and this is what I think so many people either overlook or dismiss or forget, I don't know what it is, it doesn't really matter, but that critical link between what my body is and who I am are two different things. And if I don't understand that, I will lose myself, choice point down, to the narrative and the story and the competing voices in my head and the words and whatever, all of which will, I think, are designed to, whether maliciously or otherwise is irrelevant. It's nonetheless designed to capture capacity. So when I am caught in the narrative of my cultural conditioning, my potential is lost. Mm-hmm. And there's great effort. Parenting, as we've explored in a lot of different places in a lot of different ways, parenting is the channel for the expression of intergenerational culture. So how do I interrupt that? Well, I can fight against historical efforts, or I can learn to relate to the conversation that's going on in my body that is about me and draw on that as my resource, as evidence of my resilience, as my capacity, and create what works. So don't waste my life fighting what doesn't work. Redirect all of my attention and effort at creating what I want. That's a very, very powerful way to live. And it's a way to live that, for many people, will not get you applause from your family, from your peers, potentially from your marriage. Doesn't really matter. You will not necessarily be patted on the back and encouraged by people who care about you, because it will take you out of the mindless repetition of cultural expectation. That means you actually have to think. And thinking demands 100% of your attention. Mm. And if you're not focused 100%, you're not thinking, you're running habits. Mm. Not bad, not wrong, not useful. If you want to create a quality of life for yourself that is, from your perspective in your own life, is more enriching in some way than the one that you currently live from. Mm. Wow. So decloaking is the first door that opens. And decloaking, so who is decloaking and living authentically for? I think decloaking is for everybody except the indifferent. I think if you're indifferent, maybe, well, possibly, well, I got nothing to do for 5 days, or I don't think decloaking is the right place for someone whose mindset is that going into it. I think decloaking demands certain things. It demands curiosity, because if you step into decloaking believing you already know, then you will take what is presented to you and you will make it small enough to fit into the boxes that you have already organized on the shelf of your reality. And so all of the other stuff that doesn't fit gets left behind. So I think there has to be a certain curiosity about, gee, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe there is something out there I haven't discovered yet. Maybe there's another way, maybe. So you have to be willing to endure the discomfort of that. Because remember, your body is your authentic voice. So as you're being exposed to this, your body will be talking to you. So your body will be giving you messages and sharing information with you all through those 5 days. So part of day one of decloaking is to really help people understand what that means. And what do you do when your body starts talking to you? How do you engage with that? The whole quantum TLC experience, and how to go about that, and et cetera. People step into decloaking because they have a very specific problem they don't know how to solve. That's fine. That's not an issue. But this whole body of knowledge is not about solving a problem. It's about transforming a life. So decloaking will address your problem and it will show you yourself how to transform your life. It will present a process to you, a step-by-step process, not a strategy, not a go here, go there, do this, do that, a process. All of it contextualized in the larger reality that you're not your body, you're the signal that animates the body. What is that? So that you begin to understand and over 5 days come to trust that. I think people who step into decloaking have to do so with the recognition that they're going to be invited to consider things. Just consider things. It's not a command performance. It isn't that if you come into decloaking in 5 days, you must do X, Y, and Z. That's not what it's about. It's about exposure. It's about isolating your behavioral involvement for 5 days so that you're focused on yourself. Very unusual for women to do, but for 5 days, wow, that will create significant discomfort for a lot of women to pay that much attention to themselves for that period of time. Like, it gets hard to ignore stuff. It's hard to pretend that what's happening isn't happening. Like you can't just turn off the call. I mean, you can, but to just turn off the call and go, oh, got to go to Walmart. It's an emergency trip to Walmart. The 5-day commitment to yourself is that you're not going to do that way this time, right? And then at the end of the 5 days, you've been exposed to things, you've had experiences, you've gained insight, you've discovered frameworks for consideration, you have moved through likely intense responses in your body, and you've come out the other side. And now, do whatever you want. Live how you choose. So you might have at the end of it a curiosity that says, wow, I had no idea what was possible. And from that, you might decide that you hunger for more discovery about yourself in a different way. Because it's really all about discovery. It's still about discovery for me 40 years later. That's what makes it interesting. At the end of the 5 days, you might come out of it and discover, whew, wow, what was that? And you may move away from it and you may need time to assimilate and to integrate and to intellectually be able to categorize what physiologically and somatically you transformed into. So you might need time to figure out who you've become because you will be different. There's no two ways about that. But what you do with the difference that you notice yourself to have evolved through, that's entirely up to you. During decloaking, you'll get introduced to really simple things. Breathe, follow the impulse, let yourself know the truth of your experience, etc. These are not rocket science, but these are profoundly disruptive to habituation. And if and when you become willing to simply put those 6 things up there and just every day look at them, just look at them. You don't have to start a group or do whatever, just look at them and allow them to infiltrate the moment that you're in when you're looking at them and then get on with living. Because these, in my reality, these are all moments that are what it takes to take ownership of your mind. The first thing you have to do is become conscious of your mind. And decloaking will do that. It will definitely bring you into a different reality where mindfulness becomes its own intention. Being mindful becomes an intention. So the decloaking process is an introduction to this notion that I feel very strongly about, which is evolution by intention for its own sake.
Mhm.
I'm not evolving because I'm facing a problem. I'm evolving because perpetual evolution is my birthright.
Mm.
It is what feeds the living God force in matter that I am. Discovery, exploration, consideration, curiosity, these are all very, very different from compliance and habituation and agreement and repetition and all those things. So, what you're doing through decloaking is you're bringing your mindful, intentional, conscious awareness to what it is to live mindfully, intentionally, and consciously from one day to the next, from one breath to the next.
Mhm.
I'm beginning to recognize that when you live like that, something changes, not because you've forced it or because you're working hard or you broke a sweat or just something changes, something because that's how powerful we are. So the decloaking process in those 5 days provides participants with a very specific models that represent perspective.
Mhm.
So when you change your perspective, it opens the space for you to transform your reality. So these are all quote unquote the tools. So the models are part of the tools. They represent frameworks of thought through which to consider your past, your present, your future differently. What you choose is entirely up to you.
Mhm.
So this body of knowledge isn't going to tell you how to live. It's going to give you a process that is contextualized in a higher order expression of your being that will allow you to choose differently. But it's always up to you. It's always your choice. I think for some people over time, they've been annoyed by that because when someone says to you repeatedly, the quality of your life is your responsibility.
Mm.
Only you can change the quality of your life. A lot of people resent that because it means they're not a victim.
Mhm.
Oh, but you don't understand, when I grew up and my parents and my job and how much money I have and my bankruptcy and blah blah and yada. Yeah, I don't debate or dispute any of that. And I'm suggesting that in the face of what we have always already created, it would be helpful if we were to discover the undercurrents that we are running that are creating that
Mhm.
so that we can actually create something else. But it's always going to be up to us to create our lives.
Mhm.
So I think decloaking is one of the few places in the lives of any of us where women who step into that experience, you actually can tell the truth and it's welcomed.
Mm.
You actually begin to notice how fluid truth can be. You begin to notice how many truths can coexist. You begin to notice that the deep dark secrets that you carry that have such shame and fear attached to them, you begin to discover a lot of other people have exactly the same thing. That it's not unique to you because somehow you're broken or deficient or crippled or twisted or whatever. It is embedded in the cultural conditioning. And so you come together in a small group and you realize, wow, I'm not the only one.
Mm.
And you begin to notice that the roots of the disruption are not, don't lie in your brokenness, they lie in the conditioning. And that when you can begin to peel away the conditioning and you can begin to access the mechanism beneath the conditioning, you can use that mechanism to create something very different. So
Mhm.
you don't have to fight yourself for the rest of your life. You can actually accept so many aspects of yourself that you've been fighting, integrate them, and then choose something else.
Mhm. Mhm.
So for me, the decloaking experience when I was in the program room with people was always about by Wednesday, day 3 in a 5-day process at the end of the day, I would often find myself exhausted and profoundly saddened by the incredible limitations that people unwittingly from which they chose to live their lives. And then Thursday and Friday would come along and I would be exhilarated because they would leave with potential.
Mm.
I don't think we can ask for more than that.
Mhm.
I don't think that we can offer anyone more than a moment of access to their potential. And decloaking is a gateway that opens up that 5-day moment of potential. And when you leave, you decide whether you close the door or not. You can leave that gateway open to your own potential or you can close it.
Mhm.
It's up to you. And I think that's part of to me, that's part of the power of the decloaking experience. I think it's part of the deep respect of the decloaking experience for the individuation of each person that comes in there
Mhm.
and the incredibly hands-off nature of decloaking. As a facilitator in decloaking, I'm an educator, not a therapist. As a facilitator, I'm here to offer you alternative ways for you to consider your challenges and your problems and your life. I'm not here to tell you how to consider those things,
Mm.
but I am here to share with you an opportunity where possibly for the first time in your life, your adult life, you are presented with alternatives. And you're encouraged to test drive them and try them on and see
Mhm.
how they feel through those 5 days. And then hands off when you leave, live your life.
Mhm.
So people can leave decloaking. They have audio material to support them. There are books. There are all kinds of blog posts on various topics and whatever. Not to mention incredible people like you and Sarah and others who are willing to be present to people and to continue to walk with them in this journey to their own evolution.
Mhm.
And that's a choice for them. They can choose that or not. They can also connect with 3 other people they were with in the program that they were in and, set up a Zoom call once a week, once a month, whatever, to just check in with each other and see where there are no limitations on how potential can express itself at the end of the 5 days.
Mhm.
And what people leave with at the end of the 5 days is a recognition that this is just the start.
Mm.
This is just the tip of the iceberg. This is what gives you access to a mechanism, whether you access it and the degree to which you become adept with that mechanism is discovered in ongoing exploration and curiosity and manifesting and engaging in all of those different things, right?
Mhm.
The number of the programs that you've created that people can step into on a monthly basis and be, we saw from the recent email that we shared with a colleague is how quickly we are lost in the default.
Mhm.
And it isn't because we lack the intelligence. It isn't because, fear and shame are the mechanisms of fear and shame are intended to cause you to curl in on yourself and tighten into a ball and pull yourself away. That's the design. That's not a bug in the system.
Mm. Mhm.
That is the purpose of them,
Mhm.
right? So it helps to stay in a conversation that encourages you to relax and to unfold and to open and to consider things differently and to be able to do that and know you're not alone. Because when we're in that shame fear cycle, we really feel profoundly isolated and we're the only one in this
Mm.
misery and we're never going to get out of this. And we forget that The moment that we're in, where we're experiencing that, is just that, a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a moment on a continuum.
Mm-hmm.
And there will be another moment after that. And it's like that in itself opens the body and allows the body to relax into something else.
Mm.
But it's very difficult to do that when you have, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of cultural conditioning that says fear and shame are here to protect you. Trust your fear and trust your shame. So shut up,
Mm.
mind your own business, put your head down, and just do what you're expected to do.
Mm. Wow.
All of which, in my experience, are highly destructive and detrimental to the quality of our lives, let alone potential. Potential doesn't come from fear and shame.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
That's not where it comes from.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank you, Louise. Um, the unpacking of that, the truth of that, and as you're speaking, it's like I see the versions of myself moving through it. I see the clients that I've um, helped move through this process, and I see like what happens in that compression and that mistrust of anything other than what you called your fear and your shame. And then something happens in this process, and all of a sudden you're over here. It's like a snap, right? It's not this prolonged, continuous, drill. It's a moment where the perspective shifts, not by itself. It's an intentional shift. And when it shifts, you're in a very different reality. All of a sudden you're over here and what was does not even make any sense anymore. So to me, that's the power of decloaking. When you were speaking, it was the fluidity of the truth. So I can have multiple truths coexist and not know which one is the true truth and which one isn't. And how do I navigate them as if they're both true when they're not both true, but my conditioning teaches me to trust the truth that creates the fear and the shame and the compression in the body, the status quo in the body. And I engage from that version of the quote unquote truth when it may or may not be the truth. And so, this moment when you were describing what happens in decloaking, for me, I wrote down engage from your potential. Right? It's like, so it's not just that you access your potential, it's that you become adept at engaging from it. So I'm curious in this moment, as I hear myself speak, what does that mean for you? And how is that practical, right? How's that something that is meaningful in somebody's everyday life in their, work and children and husbands, etc.? What does that mean and how is it important for them?
Well, I don't ever come at anything directly, so I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna here, but I am coming back. Um, I think that what the vast, vast majority of human beings don't realize, and I mean like 99.9% of human
Mhm.
beings, they don't realize that their life, as they are living it, represents a story that they've been told,
Yes.
that they have accepted and embraced as reality. It's not reality, it's a story.
Mm.
And it's a story that tells you what you can or can't do. It's a story that tells you what's right or wrong. It's a story that tells you, if you're a woman, you can live like this. If you're a man, you can live like that, etc. Decloaking tells a different story.
Mm.
But here's the difference. Decloaking tells a different story based on information that is readily available and is not easily entered into the mainstream. So I mean school. They don't
Mhm.
teach you any of this in school. In any educational system, they're not going to teach you independent thinking.
Mm.
They're going to teach you the thinking that sustains the narrative. And now we're out of our minds on what we're teaching our children. Absolutely out of our freaking heads. But it's a different story. And the different story, decloaking tells you a different story of what you are, that you're a quantum biological being. That's a scientific fact. That your body is a quantum biological processor. That's a scientific fact. That your DNA is an antenna that receives and transmits information. That's a scientific fact. There are all kinds of things that are included in the telling of this different story that your parents could not possibly have told you because it didn't exist yet,
Mm.
or could not possibly have told you because they were not encouraged to access information beyond what they were told was right and true in fact.
Mm-hmm.
So decloaking introduces you to a different story based in information that is current and highly relevant to how a human body interacts with its environment. So, like your body digests your food, your body also digests what people are saying, and it digests a thought, and it digests a pain. It
Mm.
digests all those things. What is all that? So, decloaking introduces you to a much broader, more expansive perspective on what that is. So, fundamentally, decloaking is an educational process. It gives you models, it gives you breathe, follow the impulses, it gives you frameworks for moving through your day differently. And as you do that, you think differently and you make different choices. Um, in the process of decloaking, you actually, by virtue of this educational process, you actually get to experience how it works. You get to experience the result of it working.
Mm.
You get to experience right there in your life, relevant to your life and relative to your issues and curiosities, because it's such a small group, the entire process is shaped by the people in it. Like, we're going to talk about the things that matter to you. Like, if you showed up here for 5 days, we're going to talk about what you want to talk about. We're going to talk about what you care about. We're going to talk about what you're challenged by. We're going to talk about all your, whatever issues you want to bring to the table. That's entirely up to you. And you're going to have an experience while you're talking about that. And then when your body stabilizes, we're now going to go back through that experience and explain to you what happened.
Mm.
Explain to you what your body did so that you can make friends with your body again. And you don't have to be terrified when you feel that you're going to cry or you're going to burst into deep, loud sobs. It's not the end of the world. You discover that because you may do that, may not, but you might. And you begin to notice that the people around you don't judge you and dismiss you. The compassion runs deep,
Mm.
that we each carry one for the other. And you get to experience that. It changes us. It changes who we are. It changes the eyes through which we see the world. It changes what we define as a problem versus what we might define as an opportunity. All of those things come into play when we're looking at living our lives differently. So our life no longer becomes a problem to be solved. It becomes a journey of evolution and discovery. And along the way, things are going to present for us to pay attention to and to notice, how else might I consider this? It isn't that I can no longer see my world the way I used to see my world. It's now expanding. I can still see my world that way, but how else
Mm.
might I consider my world? How else might I choose to live my life in this moment? And recognize they are moments. So there is no moment of deep devastation. There is an experience, and then from the experience, what am I choosing to draw from that experience? What am I choosing to build on from that experience? What direction am I choosing to take my life in based on the power of that experience. There's always another moment. There's always another breath. There's always another possibility. Do I know how to give myself permission to live my life that way?
Hmm.
Does that answer your question? I don't know.
So
Question?
who remembers these things? But as you were talking, I was mindful of the things that you and I will speak, the way that you and I will speak to each other. And there are so many things that we have come to conclude they mean something, and they're interconnected to all these other things that also mean something. And then those things are interconnected to these other things that also mean something. And so when you say language like, your body, you are a quantum biological being, that is like a plethora of things that are attached to that from my perspective, from my experience, having navigated this body of knowledge now for 8 years, but the first time that I went through decloaking, hearing those words and being like, what does that mean? Like, I couldn't understand what that means until I had a visceral experience of what it meant, right? Until all of the things that I was hearing somehow interconnected in my nervous system in the right order for my specific nervous system, and it shifted. And now I can never not know the truth of that. So I was in a conversation recently with a client, and she's like, I don't know what quantum means. Like, she's very frustrated. And I said, okay, you'll know it experientially. By the end of the 1 hour call, I said to her, that's what it means right there, that experience. And she's like, oh my God. And then the next wave of like, oh, that too is quantum. And then the next wave of, oh, that too is quantum. And this massive awakening of what it means without the definition of what it means, right? Where it's like a visceral knowing of what it means. And it cannot be debated. It cannot be manipulated. It cannot be misconstrued, and it cannot be denied. So part of the process for me in decloaking is ensuring that the people that step into it have these undeniable experiences of themselves where they leave knowing, like viscerally, truthfully rooted in their knowing of what they know and how to hear what they know, because the vibration in the body is very different when it's expansion and like, oh, new awareness downloading, as opposed to contraction and that like repeat chainsaw of the status quo. So I'm very mindful that decloaking is a deeply educational process, a sacred educational process that redefines, quite frankly, everything that we hold as fixed, everything that we hold as boxed in, everything that we hold as an is, as you like to say, because nothing is an is. All of the ises are constructed and then sustained through cultural conditioning and through, often that's what cultural conditioning is to me anyway, violence, right? It's a form of violence, whether or not you're physically hurting or whether you're humiliating and shaming a 2 or 3 year old child. That's violence, where they're not allowed to know the truth of their experience, where they're not allowed to have a perspective that says, hey, that wasn't right, or where they're not allowed to be an expression of themselves. So it's like that drawing that my son drew, and I don't know if you remember, where everybody has their magic stick, but they're all fighting to take each other's magic stick, not noticing that they each hold it themselves, right? He came up with that on his own as a 5 year old child and has a story to tell about it, of this other person standing over here, and their magic stick is multicolored, and their magic stick is beautiful, and they're smiling where all these other people are sad. because they don't know they are magic.
Everything that you just talked about there is so incredible. Your son is who he has become because he has parents who give him permission to be unique.
Mm.
He has parents who give him permission to not know and be unsure and have a new idea and present something the way that it's meaningful for him. And you receive that and you incorporate that into how you communicate with him and how you cherish him. To me, decloaking, the whole body of knowledge evolved in order to offer permission to consider something else.
Mm.
The quantum biological aspect of it all is an educational component. So if I don't know, if I don't know what I don't know, then I can't choose it. So the point of decloaking, because its underpinning is educational, the point of decloaking is to be able to give you permission to consider these things that have likely not fit into your life. So you consider the idea of who we are and what we are two different things. I am not my body. I am the signal that animates the body. The body is a device. So now I can educate for awareness of that there are two things there.
Mm.
And I can educate for an understanding of how they interact and how they communicate with each other. Because my authentic voice is my body. Because my body is what is converting the signals from self to something that is functional for me in a world of matter.
Mm.
But if I don't know that my body is a quantum biological device, I cannot choose it.
Mm-hmm.
So educating into just beginning to introduce the language of it and quantum biology and energy and frequency and vibration and all those things that have been around for decades, but nobody talks about it. Nobody brings it into your consciousness when you're thinking about a decision that you're making today. So to me, decloaking is a massive invitation for discovery with full permission for any participant to engage it as is meaningful for them.
Mm.
And the brilliance of who you are as a facilitator and others who are coaches, the brilliance is who you have become by virtue of this body of knowledge over the last 8 years. You can travel with anyone anywhere they want to go,
Mm.
and you will be just fine. And you will keep them safe in their journey of discovery. And I think safety is critical.
Mm.
People have to know that they're not going to be harmed in the process. They have to know and trust that you, as the educator, facilitator of that process, you know what you're doing. And why do you know what you're doing? Because you live it.
Mm.
It is not a book that you read 8 years ago. It's who you have become over time.
Mm-hmm.
It is deeply, deeply rooted in an alternative structure of reality as a potential.
Mm-hmm.
I remember
So,
years ago when I first started this, and there were no books and audio materials and whatever. There were just the models. And I remember how I can't even begin to tell you how many people would come up and would say to me, "Can you come home and talk to my husband? Can you explain all of this to him?" And I said, "No, but you can go home and just be honest.
mm.
Like, you don't have to explain all of this to your husband. You can go home and you can say, for a long time now, I've been saying that I like this. I don't really like it. I was really just trying to please you and to not bring stress into your life. But can we talk about it?" You could do that.
Mm.
That would be far more potent than having me come and sit at your kitchen table, drink your coffee, and try to educate your husband. So that's where the books and the audio materials and the blogs and the radio show episodes and all that stuff, they became reference points. But the power of this process is that if you step into decloaking for 5 days, at the end of those 5 days, maybe at the end of day one, who knows? At the end of those 5 days, you can live differently. That you do or don't choose to live differently, entirely up to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As a facilitator in decloaking, I have no control over that. But what I can do when you step into decloaking, if I were in the program with you, by virtue of you stepping into decloaking, you are giving me permission to be authentic with you. You're giving me permission to be able to share with you the insights that come to mind for me as I'm engaging with you, the things that I notice that you might have been noticing differently. And now, in doing so, it expands the buffet of your potential ways of engaging, of your potential responses. So for me, decloaking is an invitation. It's the permission for you to be able to just consider how else you might live. And always the choice is yours. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was on a roll there. You know how it goes.
I do. I love it.
I'm
Like,
in the zone.
I really could listen to you all day, every day. So that's kind of where I'm at. What brought tears to my eyes when you were speaking is this notion of permission to be unique. And I think that's what differentiates this body of knowledge from everything I had tried for a decade before I stumbled upon it. It's that it gives me, the process, the tools, the education, the opportunities to step into and continuously discover who am I? Because that's how it started for me. It's like, who am I really? Because I knew I wasn't an addict. I knew I wasn't, firstborn daughter. I knew I wasn't all those things that were shaping my life out of my awareness or in my awareness, but I knew they weren't true. And I certainly wasn't going to accept the narrative that my addiction, quote unquote, is a disease. Like that was just never going to happen. So in knowing that this wasn't who I was, I had no access to, well, who am I? Right. And how do I discover who am I? So for me personally, decloaking opened up that, blew the fucking roof off, never mind open the door, right? Where I now knew exactly what to reach for in the moments of uncertainty, in the moments of confusion, in the moments of second guessing myself, etc. In that moment where tension was happening, I knew what to reach for in order to discover who I am and to integrate the stories of who I have been or who I've been told to be or who I've believed myself to be and so on and so forth. And then in the staying of the exploration, in the continue, because I mean, I'm hungry to know myself, and I believe the women that work with me also are.
Critical.
Um, in that journey to discover that who I am is not big enough because it becomes a label in and of itself. So discovering who I am from engaging my potential, discovering who I am from that space became very, very different than engaging from what I know. Because the moment that I compress my identity into I am X, as you said, I leave out everything that isn't X. And so the critical part of this body of knowledge is bringing people to the choice point, what we call the choice point. And from the choice point to recognize that I can either choose from my conditioning, my habits, my beliefs, my history, or, and it isn't or, I can choose from that which is yet undefined, right? I can choose from something that I'm creating as I'm navigating my experience honestly inside myself, as I'm navigating the moment that I'm in honestly and authentically and truthfully. And in that, the download happens and the download leads to the choice. So if everybody, and if I were ruler of the world, this is what I would do. Everybody would go through decloaking. Right? Everybody would experience this so that they know what's possible and then they can choose. But that knowing of where you stand matters I feel like that's the thing that's missing from most conversations, that choice point, the moment that you're in, and how to choose from the choice point in order to live an authentic life. Not talk about living an authentic life, live an authentic life.
So here's a distinction that I would make, because the day that I fell back on my bed and something happened, and then I I I literally laid there and I was gobsmacked and speechless, and what the fuck was that? Like an experience that I had never, ever, ever, ever had in my life. And it lasted maybe 3 minutes, and I knew I was profoundly different. And I spent 40 years exploring it, right? Because I think the distinction that I would make that says yes to everything that you said is in the potential to know who I am or the potential to know what I am, there's much more power in the what.
Mm.
Because the what opens the definition of the who.
Mm-hmm.
So if I look at who I am, the draw is to consider my personality, my character, my behaviors, my strategies for moving through the world, etc. But it does not touch this notion that I am a separate container called a person, and I have an identity called Louise that I put the label on. The exploration of what I am is mind-blowing because I am not remotely what I was told I was.
Mm-hmm.
I am immensely more powerful than that. And in the discovery of that and the ownership of it, it transforms the who that I choose to be. So this, to me, this is why decloaking is such a critical entry point, because it is a long enough period of time and demands separation from your quote unquote normal routine for you to become steeped in the exploration of what are you? You're not what you've been told you are. You're far more powerful. And if you don't understand that, the who you think you are remains weenie. And you're not here to be weenie. You're here to be immense.
I hope you can feel the depth of the potential of what's possible for you through gifting yourself the experience that is decloaking and living authentically. Wherever you are in your journey, I want you to know that the journey that you're embarking upon is big. So whether you start with the decloaking audio files and you start in your corner of the universe and begin to listen to those so that your body begins to trust what we're talking about, whether you choose to engage privately with me or another code model coach of your choice, or whether you choose to actually step into the 5-day intensive that opens up the rest of the pathway through this body of knowledge, whatever the choice that you make, your body feels that this is a big exploration. You can feel the potential and the pull from it because it demands that you show up. And that's both immensely exciting and terrifying. For most people, it feels like that. But it's a necessary journey for those who want it. It's a necessary embracement of their courage for those who want it, because you want your life to have meaning. So the idea of more of you showing up can feel a bit scary, but it can also be exhilarating if you give yourself permission to feel and to be pulled rather than to succumb to the story of your conditioning and give up your future to your past. So it's a very powerful way to live, and one that I am deeply honored to be the facilitator of. It's a choice that I make because it's so enlivening for me to see people awaken to the truth of who and what they are so that they're able to live from it. And I know how this works because I've lived it. I walked in terrified and distrustful and skeptical, and I walked out with this immense sensation of what's possible for me. And I knew this was different because it gave me exactly what I needed to know and what I needed to do in the moments where I lost myself to my own stories, my own thoughts, my own conditioning, my own programming, familiar expectations, and so on and so forth. So I invite you in this moment, if you're pulled to, engage in a conversation with me in order to discover if decloaking is the next right step for you at this point in time. And if it is, I will invite you into the experience. And if it's not, we will explore together what's meaningful for you to engage at this point in time. Thank you for listening. Please know that there will be more of these explorations between Louise Lebrun and I, and we'll see where the conversation takes us. They're never planned. There's no outline. There's an intentionality, and that intentionality manifests in the magic that we co-create. That sounds like this exploration. And I leave you with a reminder from the words of Louise Lebrun.
You're not here to be weenie. You're here to be immense.